systems these days, when you talk about biodiesel, are waterless because of these hydrogen ion exchange beads that they've come out with now that take up the water and the sodium hydroxide that is in the part of your process. We do wash one time just because it makes a cleaner fuel, but it does alleviate some of the wastewater that you have with the older systems where you have to wash 5 or 6 times. Okay?
Right, actually. We haven't covered this in class, so perhaps you could just very briefly go through what the process involves before you even start going into it.
Okay. When you make biodiesel, what we do is we collect waste vegetable oil, so that people call it in the industry, they call it yellow grease. Waste vegetable oil, it's just used restaurant oil from the restaurants. You can have good restaurant used oil, and you can have bad restaurant used oil, okay? Kentucky Fried Chicken is one of the worst oils we've found so far, and the way you know your oil is good or bad is you do a titration to find out how many free fatty acids are in the oil. And a free fatty acid is simply a reaction that occurs after the restaurant uses the oil over and over and over again, frying chicken or French fries or fish or whatever that they're frying, okay? And what happens is the free fatty acid removes itself from the glycerin backbone. We'll cover all this in class in chemistry. And once that free fatty acid is removed from the glycerin during the cooking process at the restaurant, then it's no longer used as a fuel when I go collect it, okay? So once that free fatty acid is out there away from the glycerin backbone, it's no longer usable for a fuel for me, okay? Now there's some things you can do to reattach that fatty acid to the glycerin backbone, but they cost you more money, and it's caustic chemicals, it's acids, so we don't really fool with that much. So we look for a source that is at least a good used oil source, okay? Kentucky Fried Chicken titrated at 7 and has titrated at 7 the whole time we picked it up for the last year. And that is a really bad oil, okay? We like oil to titrate at 4 or below. And that usually comes from donut shops, Chinese restaurants, people who just do French fries but don't do chicken or fish. Fish is cleaner than chicken. Chicken is one of the dirtiest oils you can possibly find, okay? And everybody loves fried chicken, right? That's one of the dirtiest oils that you can find because they fry that chicken over and so much chicken in a day, and they really destroy the grease, okay? So that's the first thing. You've got to look for a clean oil source, or at least an adequately clean oil source, okay? We're picking up at Maxwell Air Force Base now, so their oil's titrating, at 4 and below. So we have a better source of oil now. When you have oil that titrates high, it costs you more in methanol, it costs you more in your sodium hydroxide, because you gotta have more of those chemicals to make the transesterification reaction occur, okay? So we pick up oil, we usually just put this container in the back of the pickup truck, we have pumps, and we just go to the different restaurants and we pump out of their containers, or we furnish them with containers and we just pump their oil out. We went yesterday to Maxwell and got 150 gallons of oil. When we bring it back, we dump it in this big black tank out here, and we let it settle for a month. So you let the particulates settle down to the bottom, because all you really want out of the oil is the oil itself, and not the chicken batter and French fry seasonings and whatever else it is put in there. Okay? And it's not a clean job. It's a nasty job. You don't want to eat fried food after that for lunch. So then once we get it here, and we have a decent oil source, we pump it into this tank, and we go through these filters. This is a 400 micron filter. So, if I do not let it settle long enough, or I don't have time for it to settle long enough, I go through this 400 micron and I catch some of the batter and a lot of the particulates that are left in the oil, okay? So this is a very important step before you send it into your system, because any particulates that you send into your system, makes bad fuel, okay? So we drain into here, and we just make 40 gallons a time. We're not mass producing anything here. We're just teaching farmers and contractors that there's a better way, for them to either blend. Most of them have to use it as a blend. You can't make enough in a day, to supply them. The next step after filtration is you got to heat the oil up to about 120 degrees. Okay, so we do that several ways. We have a heater that we stick in the drum to start heating up the oil, because it takes a long time. It takes 3 or 4 hours to heat 40 gallons of oil in this current temperature. Okay, in the summertime it's a couple of hours when it's really hot outside, but when it's 50 degrees, even 60 degrees, it takes many hours to heat the oil. So we have a drum heater in here. We also have a heater on the back of our system. It's like an inline heater, so as the oil gets transferred to the tank, it just circulates through the heater and it warms, okay? But the key thing is you gotta get it to that 120 degrees, or your reaction when you do your methoxide, your methanol and your sodium hydroxide will not occur as readily as it should, okay? And you'll have an incomplete reaction. And incomplete reactions make bad fuel, okay? So once it's in here and it's heated up, you've done your titration, we'll go over all this in class in more detail. You know how much methanol and sodium hydroxide to put in here to make the transesterification occur. That has to mix at about 120 degrees for another 2 hours, okay? So making the fuel the first day is the most time-consuming portion. After that, it's just coming in and draining the glycerin out and washing it with a little water and sending it through the drying agent, okay? So once you put your methoxide solution in here, you're gonna let it sit overnight after you've processed it for a couple hours. The next day, you're gonna come in and drain the glycerin off, and that's another indicator of how good your fuel is how much glycerin and the amount of glycerin that you pull off after your reaction, okay? A good reaction will give you about 20% glycerin, okay? So I should get about 8 gallons of glycerin out of my 40 gallons, okay? And what happens is your methoxide is also 20%. So I get 8 gallons of methoxide, 40 gallons, I should get out 8 gallons of glycerin. So it kind of is like a good oil source will give you a displacement of a 1-to-1. So if I put 40 gallons of oil in here, I should make 40 gallons of fuel, okay? But the higher my titration goes, the worse my oil is, the more free fatty acids that are unavailable for me to make fuel, that ratio goes down to like a 0.8 to 1, okay? So then I pull out more glycerin than 8 gallons. I can get 12 or 16 gallons of glycerin, to the same amount of methoxide. Then I don't have 40 gallons of fuel anymore. I have 32 or 35. It just depends on the oil source, okay? And then once we have our glycerin, we put about 10 gallons of oil, of water in there. And that water is just to catch the extra sodium hydroxide catalyst that's left in their reaction. You can really read all kind of ways to wash fuel. You can just sprinkle wash it, bubble wash it, just pour hot water in. Any of the methods work. They all work the same. They're just pulling out the extra sodium hydroxide that's left in the reaction, because you don't want that in your fuel because it corrodes your lines, it corrodes your fuel injectors, okay? And you can only have less than 20 parts per million of salts in an acceptable biodiesel product, okay? So that helps pull some of the sodium hydroxide out. And the next thing you're going to do is, like I said, all systems now that you pretty much buy, unless you get just one that you make yourself, have what they call these hydrogen ion exchange beads, which soak up the remaining sodium hydroxide or any water that is left in the fuel, and it just circulates through this filter in the back with the beads in it, and they're itty bitty tiny beads, a little bit larger than a salt grain, okay? And they're good for about 1,000 gallons, so you have to keep up with how much you're making, and you'll know when they start wearing out, because by all the little tests that you do, you can tell that your beads are getting used, okay? So it goes through that drying process for a couple of hours, and what you should come out with is a real clear amber colored fuel, okay? And we have just you can send your fuel off for testing in the laboratory. We have a small test that we do here just to see if we made good fuel or bad fuel. And they call it the 27-3 test, and we'll go over this more in detail in class too. You put 27 mils of methanol in a tube and 3 mils of your finished product in a tube. And if you get a product that looks like this with no particulate at the bottom, then you pretty much have a good fuel that you can use in your tractor or on the farm, okay? That's just a little small test that you can do. However, if after your process, you get something that looks like this, you know that you had an incomplete reaction on your front end, okay? You didn't get all the glycerin out of your product. And so what you see here is mono and triglycerides that are not miscible in the methanol, and they go to the bottom. So this is fuel I would only put in a tractor. I would not put it in a truck and have fuel injecting systems, okay? Just an old tractor that runs on the old method of injectors for tractors. We've not had any problem, any of the farmers, even if they make bad fuel like this, run it in their tractors. But I don't suggest they run it in their truck. Only when it comes out in this fashion do I suggest that they run it in their truck. So that's just a small test for them to say, hey, I made a good fuel, or maybe I didn't make such a good fuel. Now, when we pull the glycerin off of our process, we put it in tanks, metal drums mostly, and this is a toxic material because it has methanol in it, has sodium hydroxide in it, and it has glycerin in it, okay? In order for the EPA to say that this is not toxic, I have to pull the methanol out of it, okay? And I want to pull the methanol out of it because that's one of the most expensive parts of the whole process. It's anywhere from $3.15 a gallon to $3.50 a gallon to $4.50 a gallon, depending on the time of the year, okay, that you purchase and how much you purchase, okay? This last batch was $3.15 a gallon. So I want to recover as much as I can out of this glycerin, number one, to make it a non-hazardous product for the environment, and number two, to go back into my process so that I can make fuel cheaper, okay? So essentially, for every 80 gallons of fuel I make, I get one batch for free, okay? So I can pull out enough methanol out of 40 gallons of glycerin to take one process through for the methanol, okay? So I want to do that. I want to recover my methanol. And we'll go over those numbers in classes. The way we recover our methanol, we pump it into this 50-gallon hot water heater that we pretty much gutted because we tore everything up once or twice.
That's the glycerin. That's the glycerin.
The glycerin. We're going to put the glycerin in here, about 40 gallons of glycerin in here, and we're going to put a propane burner in here, just a regular propane tank, and you're going to heat this up to about 163 degrees Fahrenheit, and your methanol is going to start distilling out into this double reflux column here. That's just a basic distillation column. And then you're going to get straight 100% methanol coming out the other end. Because methanol is not miscible with water or the glycerin. It's going to come off first. It's going to come off fast. It takes me about 4 hours to recover 8 gallons of methanol in this system. And you can make all kind of condensers for methanol because it doesn't form with water. You know, it doesn't form an azeotropic solution with water. It stands alone. So you can make a very simple condensation unit, or you can make a complex one like this one. It doesn't matter. Okay? I've seen people make a copper tube inside of a 5-gallon drum and just run water in and out of the bucket, you know, and it just distills off the methanol just fine. Okay. So once we have the methanol distilled off our glycerin, then we can make soap, or we can make burn logs, glycerin burn logs, you know, like the Duraflame logs that you buy in the grocery store. Glycerin burns, and so you can mix it with a little wood product, and we usually form it in an orange juice container. This is a wax container. You know, just make a few blocks. They burn a couple of hours a piece. We make soap, hand soap, or gel soap. You know, you can do either one by just adding a little water. You can make it a jelly soap, or by letting it sit out and letting some of the water evaporate. You can make a bar soap. Okay, so we make both here. If you want some soap, I have soap. Okay. So that's pretty much the biodiesel process. The front end takes about 6 hours to get it started, and you know, once it's started, the next day you drain the glycerin, and then the next day you wash it, and you're done. Okay.
Of course, when the price of gas and diesel were high last summer, everybody was trying to do this on the farms and everything, and what Carla was doing was actually, and still is, training farmers to do it. The big deal is though that the sources of oil, used cooking oil, get snapped up pretty fast. Did you tell them where you get yours?
I told them, yeah.
Yes, okay. It was kind of surprising that Maxwell hadn't already.
Or doesn't do it just to run in their maintenance trucks and tractors. But
are there any questions about the biodiesel?
How much does it cost for one of these kits?
they're about $4,800 right now.
That's right, you said
But you can, everything that this thing's put together with, once you learn how to run one, you can build one yourself. They build them out of hot water heaters, you know. But I like these conical type containers because everything drains very
Can
well.
you use anything but reused
Anything.
oil?
I've seen people use 55-gallon drums and make
But no, but for
systems.
the source of, can you use something besides oil?
You can
Reuse.
use animal fat, but the process is a lot difficult. It's much more difficult, you know, because that gets into heavy, single-chain fatty acids and not double. The double-bonded fatty acids make the best fuel. 18, 2s and 3s make the best fuel. And those are usually your hydrogenated oils. But you can do it from animal fat, yeah. But it's much more complicated.
As a layperson though, what do we do with the waste product then? We're not gonna be able to,
Then you have to arrange with your waste management area, if you're in the city, you have to arrange with your city waste. You know, you can arrange to have them pick it up, but it's considered hazardous material, so you have to treat it store it as hazardous material, collect it as hazardous material, and dispose of it as hazardous
because
material.
we can't also try to drain off the
Sure you can.
methanol.
All you need is a burner and a condensation unit.
And how much is that unit cost?
You can spend $2,500 on it like that, or you can make it for a couple of $100. Because methanol is very easy to distill off. You know, it's not like ethanol. Ethanol can be complicated, but methanol comes right off the top, and you're assured it's 100%. You just get a hydrometer; it's always going to be 100%.
And then they'll take the waste away.
Then they'll take the waste away, or you can make soap, you know, or whatever.
You can compost it once the
You
methanol
can compost glycerin. Yeah.
is out of it as well.
Once
So,
the methanol's out, yeah.
You can't compost it.
So that's pretty much the biodiesel process, okay? The ethanol process is a little more complicated. And we've done sugar to alcohol with our sorghum, sweet sorghum, our corn sorghum, and sugar. And we also do corn, sweet potatoes, turnips, green artichokes, and our starch to sugar to alcohol conversion, okay? I like sugarcane and sweet sorghum a lot better than I do the starch to sugar to alcohol conversion because it's less time consuming, costs less, and to me it makes a better, you know, I can get more for my time. I won't say for my money, I'll say for my time. This is our sugarcane sorghum press. USDA Soil Dynamic Lab and Almond made it for us. We can do sugarcane and sorghum in here. We can do a one-time press and do 85% efficiency of juice recovery, okay? It can do 5 gallons an hour. So it's kind of slow, but it's totally portable. I can run it off a power source unit that they came and got because they needed it. It's hydraulic. Or I can take it out in the field and hook it up to a tractor, and it's totally portable, okay? It just has an up and down switch, so it goes back and forth.
Okay, so
Or your
just for those of you not familiar with presses, these drums roll and you just push the stalks in there and it squeezes the juice out of the stalks, whether it be sweet sorghum or sugarcane or whatever. So this really for sweet sorghum and sugarcane, the power just turns those drums and you feed that in and it catches the juice down there. You pretty much got straight sucrose to work with after that. That's easy stuff to do.
Yeah, I like that. It's really nice. And then I like sorghum better than sugarcane simply because it has a shorter growth time, 120 days, okay? I can do 2 crops a year. Sugarcane's a 13-month crop. So it reduces me to 1 crop a year, you know. With the sorghum, we can do ambient temperature fermentation if we plant early enough in the year. This year we're going to plant in March and April, so we'll be fermenting in the middle of the summer when it's really hot. We need 80 degrees or more. So we usually put our juice in a plastic container that we can seal. Our tube will go into a bucket of water, so it's totally anaerobic. We can sample our juice to tell when fermentation is complete. And once fermentation is complete, we start the distillation cycle with our distillation unit. The same unit we use for pyromethanol to make ethanol. Okay? And all this is done right here in the shop. I just put these on a pallet in ambient temperature, and they ferment in 4 or 5 days. Okay? We usually try to get about 5 gallons of juice per sample. So we use yeast, not really baker's yeast. It's a more improved yeast. It's alcohol yeast that you can buy. It's called red yeast. It works pretty good. So that's pretty much the ethanol. Then, like I said, we take it over to the still, and we distill our ethanol. On a one-time distillation of that particular double reflux still, we can get 180 proof. 160 proof or above running meat. So we can make field grade alcohol with one run on that double reflex. Okay? If you don't have a double reflex still, 4 or 5 runs is going to be what you need to get to that 160 or 100 proof alcohol. And have some smell. Now I mentioned we also did starch to sugar to alcohol conversions. The USDA also made us a nice little tuber type press. Sorry, my irrigation system is really bad.
Just come up close and have a look at this press.
The same guy who made the sugarcane press also made this press for potatoes or turnips or roots or artichokes, any tuber type plant, okay? And you just, you can put about 5 pounds of potatoes in here, and this arm just goes down, again hydraulic, totally portable, you can take it out in the field if you want to. It goes down, there's 1/2-inch holes drilled into this PVC pipe, and it comes, you just put a bucket under there and it comes out like mashed potatoes. So you totally have all the surface area you need to work with for your enzymes. And like I said, totally portable, you can put it on a tractor, take it to the field, and work with it there. But you kind of want to wash those brown roots because they got dirt on them, you know? So you kind of want to send them through one wash, cycle, and then roll them in here so you don't have all the dirt to deal with and bacteria. So that's another thing that USDA made us that we're proud of because it's very useful.
You're doing some kind of permit to make alcohol?
I do have a state and federal permit to make that.
You have to.
You shot operation here.
We also,
They worry that you're going to be selling it for drink.
I think that's better than diesel fuel.
last year pressed some ryegrass in here and made some ryegrass. So that was interesting.
Is there a limit on how much of this ethanol you can make?
We have a permit for 10,000 gallons a year. Sugar cane. It smells sweet, and it smells sweet when you're cooking it. When you're distilling it, you can immediately smell when when the alcohol's fixing to start coming out of the condenser on top. You'll smell that sweet smell, and you go, "Oh, this isn't gonna happen," you know? Because you just smell it. It smells really good. And sugarcane and sorghum are different from each other. Sugarcane is sweeter smelling to me than the sorghum is. But like I said, it takes 4 or 5 days at ambient temperature to ferment. So that's a great cost save when you compare sorghum to sugarcane. Because sugarcane you harvest late November, early December. You don't have the ambient temperature to work with. So you have to put it in an incubator or put it. Is someone coming?
No. What time
When
do
do you
you
normally do it?
When do you
Oh,
need
if you're gonna start diesel, you're gonna have to be here all day, on a day. And I can only do that on Tuesday or Thursday, because we have class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
gas tank on this generator is gone. There is no gas tank here. So he's just showing you that he was running the generator off syngas, synthesis gas coming off the gasifier, which is running on wood. He wasn't using any liquid fuel to run that generator. Okay, let me just introduce then to you Mr. Wayne Keith, who'll be hopefully with us for the rest of the day. Drove down from Springville, which is just northeast of Alabama, this morning on wood. This is a wood-fired pickup. Wayne, I'm going to ask you to tell them what you got here.
Okay.
Climb up there and show that. And we put this into a bag for you.
Okay. We put our
Got one?
wood, biomass, or whatever. We ran just about everything there. Run just about everything. This corn stalks, cotton stalks, pivot hedge, kudzu. I don't like to run. I like to mix some wood in it. It's important. It keeps a good charcoal base in it. So as long as I have a good charcoal base, I can run almost. Down inside, it has to be somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 degrees. Although it's got to be 2,000 or 3,000 degrees inside to work. Goes down through the system back to this container. It's a heat exchanger and filter. Goes into this radiator system and goes around and down underneath the truck. Got some settlement tanks underneath condensation. Then it comes through a filter here on the motor. Any questions? I know there's going to be a bunch of them. I'll ask a question and that'll.
Okay, you got the picture that is generating carbon monoxide and hydrogen, is essentially a bit of methane and maybe CO2. Cooling the gas down, cleaning it up, and then simple description, taking it straight to the engine and running this vehicle on just wood. Wayne, what you done about 50,000 miles on wood now?
Yeah, I've driven this truck about 25,000. This particular one, I've got 3 of them. But you can see the craft that I'm running off of. You might look at it as hurricane debris. No difference in hurricane debris.
So anyway, good demonstration of small-scale gasification. What you can do. Don't think that this is simple stuff. It's not simple. And Wayne has spent a lot of time fine-tuning it and getting it to a point where this one is pretty user-friendly. Even a stupid professor can drive it. You can see almost every plant is different from another, so it's not very uniform. It's a native grass, wild, and it's cross-pollinated, so very, very diverse plants. And if you want to improve it, you've got to obviously get much more uniformity that you see here behind us. We'll be talking a lot more about switchgrass, but I just wanted to let you see it firsthand, close up, see what it looks like, and see that that I'm not joking when I say that it can grow 8-9 feet tall, sometimes 10 feet tall. And you can see tremendous variation among these plants. There's a real tall one there. That's probably 10 feet tall at the back there. But what's interesting is what you see here was what grew. We're going to burn it now. We burnt it last winter as well. So what you see here grew last summer, and with zero, no fertilizer, nothing. And that is pretty darned amazing. You don't find many plants that can give you that kind of a yield with no fertilizer. We haven't fertilized this in about 4 years.
You've got four cycles without any fertilizer at all?
Yes. Now, having said that, and it's a fair question, understand that when you burn it, you're dumping the nutrients back there. So we're not taking it all. Okay. When you burn, your P and K is going back, no nitrogen. But the nitrogen is the crucial thing, and the nitrogen is gone. So I actually think this plant's probably doing some nitrogen fixation somehow with free living microorganisms in the soil that's associated with its roots. Maybe we need to study that closer. So what I want you to think about is what you're going to watch happen here in just a few minutes. Basically, standing right here, we've probably got, I'm guessing about 2 tons of solid material. Okay, so let's just visualize that. If you came in and you cut this and you rolled it up into round bales, you would get 4 1,000-pound bales. That's what I'd estimate, and I think I've had enough experience that my estimate's pretty close to that. Okay, solid. Now 2 tons, heavy stuff. Okay, that's a pile of weight. All right, you wouldn't be able to pick it up. You and I can't pick that kind of stuff up. Think about that. The other thing that I do want to mention, you just walked across those little switchgrass plots there that have been cut off. You probably, as you walked across there, you felt it crunching under your feet. That's bad news for tires. That goes right through. It'll go through car tire. It'll go through the front tires of tractors. Sorry, I don't want to be crude here, but there's nothing that'll piss a farmer off more than flats. Okay, they're getting flats all the time, and that'll give him flats. So one needs to take that into account when we get into the commercial production of switchgrass. We found either you put silicon in there, or you go with metal tracked vehicles, which of course are pretty tough on the soil, the surface, and so on. I just wanted to point that out because it's a good opportunity. If you feel that stuff, you'll see it goes right through tires. No, not a problem at all, and that'll tick farmers off big time. When we took this commercial with those, I don't know, you may remember I showed you some slides, and I will show them to you again, with a couple of farmers up near Talladega, and they started harvesting. I warned them. I said, you need to put silicon in your front tires at least, and they said no, they didn't want to do that. They tend to bounce more and it'll chuck you off if you rough that. Well, the first day they started cutting, they had 8 flats, and that takes time. It's time down. It's extremely irritating. So I just thought while we were here, and I just point that out to you. We do all of this research on small plots and everything with our equipment, and we don't actually often perceive what the problems are going to be when we head to commercial level. And that's one of the things that came out once we moved on to the commercial level. Hey, this stuff will give you flats, and it's an issue. So we need to deal with that.
Maybe the beginning.
I don't know about that.
Good.
3/4 of what we had there is gone. Regular combustion, what are we doing? We're oxidizing the carbon and the hydrogen into water vapor and carbon dioxide, okay? So we and about half, right around a little less than half of the weight of biomass is carbon. About 48% carbon usually in most biomass. So we just put 3/4 of a ton of carbon into the air. That's what we just did. And so I guess one of the concepts that I try and get across by doing this is for you to visualize this is heavy stuff that we've converted to gas, and we put it up in a matter of a few minutes, not very much stuff there. We put it, so visualize what's happening when we're burning coal, tons and tons and tons of coal in a power plant to generate electricity. And that's what we do all the time. And we are just putting tons and tons and tons of carbon into the atmosphere, up there. So think about that. We did it here. Now the difference between what we did here and what we do with coal is that those plants, that switchgrass, got its carbon from out of the atmosphere. Okay, so we're just cycling carbon here. All fossil fuels, we're taking that carbon out from down there and we're putting it up there. Plants, we're not doing that because they get their carbon from up there, so you're just cycling and essentially it's carbon neutral. So anyway, that was the main idea behind doing this kind of demonstration, is just to get you to actually visually see that happening. We had probably 2 tons, we got half a ton left, but in a matter of a few minutes we put a ton and a half of stuff up in the atmosphere. Gone. It's kind of interesting to try and conceptualize that. We talk about it in class, but you don't often actually see it. So that's what the point of this. It's not beside the spectacular aspect of the fire. It didn't go as well as I'd hoped to. Like I say, I think mainly because it's the air temperature's down. Plus, it's fairly moist still in there, and so the water makes it. The snapping sound you hear, that's all snapping of the moisture in the stems of the switchgrass. Okay, several of you asked me, what's this stuff here? This is a potential energy crop too. It's what they call giant reed, or and I'll talk briefly about it in class. Now that probably give you. Switchgrass will give you anywhere, depending on your soil type and the variety and everything, and I'll give you a big range. It gives you anywhere between 5 and 10 tons of dry matter per acre per year. Okay, that was standing there was probably about 8 tons per acre. I said total of 2 tons there because you only got about 1/4 of an acre there. So that's why we only had a total of 2. But if you had that over a whole acre, you're looking at about 8 tons, I would estimate. This darn stuff, now again, no nitrogen. This darn stuff here will give you 20 tons per acre. That here, we're going to cut this down pretty soon. We cut this down last February, March time. All of that there that you can see standing there grew last summer. And as you might imagine, it's taller, it's pretty darn dense. You're probably going to have around 20 tons per acre based on. That's what we've got. And you know what, again, not an ounce of fertilizer in 4 or 5 years now here. So there must be some nitrogen fixation going on somewhere, somehow, which we don't understand. Having said that, a little bit more information. Switchgrass you can plant by planting seed, okay? It grows from seed. This plant doesn't produce any viable seed, and thank goodness too, otherwise it would cover us up. I mean, it would get out of hand, completely out of hand. So it's a good thing that it doesn't produce viable seed. It is mostly the origin of it is the Mediterranean region of the world, but if you really dig back into the literature, there's some evidence that it actually came from India. originally from India, native to India, and the Romans took it to the Mediterranean region. A lot of people think it's native to the Mediterranean, but I don't. Actually, they say it's from India originally. So, in order to plant it, you got to propagate it by vegetative means. It doesn't produce seed. So you can plant the cane just like sugar cane, or you can dig up rhizomes. It's got monster big rhizomes like this, bulb type structures under the ground. But you can't expand your acreage very fast by digging up the rhizomes. You probably best go with the cane. So that tells you the first problem. It's not it can be a problem, is that it's much more expensive to establish than switchgrass, because establishment from seed is relatively cheap. If you've got to go with vegetative material, it's a lot of labor, it's a lot of either labor or specialized expensive equipment, and so establishing this is going to be much more expensive. So that's the first problem. The other one is that it has a very bad weed image in the United States, because it's caused a lot of problems around, especially in California, around Los Angeles. It's clogged up riverbeds and so on. And so it's actually a proclaimed weed, especially on the West Coast. Now, it hasn't done much of that here, the East and Southeast. In fact, I don't know of anywhere where it's really been a problem here. I know patches around here that are 50, 60 years old and they haven't moved anywhere. The only way it can move, obviously, if people come and pick it up and take it somewhere, or if water excavates it and moves it downstream. It's a problem in the Rio Grande Valley, and it's a problem in quite a few of the Californian riverbeds. But it's not really a problem out here, and I'll talk more about this. But again, you feel like, wow, it has so much potential to give you high biomass yields, and that's what we've got to ultimately go for on a global basis. Land is limiting, and so ultimately land is going to be limiting to what we can do from an energy and food point of view. So yield is very, very important. And this darn plant can give you a yield like that with no fertilizer in a short period of time. But now, of course, the environmentalists will go ballistic if you start trying here in the United States. If you try this, and there are people trying to grow it as a crop, they're going to run into problems, because environmentalists can cut you off just like that in Washington real fast. So we'll talk more about this in class, but again, I wanted you to see it. We're not going to burn this one. The other problem with a plant, any plant, even the sorghums that Carla was talking about, from a point of view of converting them to fuels with certain technologies or gasifying them, the other problem with this kind of yield is it's very difficult to dry that material. Even though it looks dry, that stuff that you see there, right there, is probably running about 50% moisture. And to dry it down is difficult. Even if you cut it and dropped it on the ground, you cut it off, dropped it on the ground, it just doesn't dry. It's very woody, and so the moisture just doesn't come out. Whereas that stuff there, you cut it down in the fall, it'll dry out in the sun probably within 3 or 4 days. Then you can roll it up, and why do you need it dry? You need it dry for 2 reasons. Firstly, you're going to have to store it. Typically, you're going to have to store it for a long time. We cut these plants only one time in the year, but we've got to feed these processing plants 365 days a year. So we're going to have to store this material somehow, and the best way to do that is to dry it down so that it doesn't rot. And so for storage purposes, you need to dry it, and then there are most of the technologies that I think are going to be the best for producing energy. They require the material to be dry going in the front end. So from a technology point of view and from a storage point of view, we need to dry it. So these and there we have this darn conflict. Then these plants that give us the real nice yield which we like are difficult to dry. And so it's not, so many people think, oh, yield is it. We pick crops. Yield is not the only thing. And if you can't dry it, you've got yourself a problem. And that's where we really do face a problem with this, and some of the very high yielding sorghums too. Very difficult to dry. And people say, well, can't we just artificially dry them? Darned expensive.
How about when you run through a crimper or something and break the stems off?
That might help a bit, but it's still, we ran some of those big sorghums through crimper, and the darn, your windrows are this size, and they're just very, very difficult.
What is that stuff used for? What the Romans do with that thing?
Yeah, well, I don't know what the Romans did with it. Well, I do. They actually at one time they've made they've made I guess rayon out of it. It's got an unusual fiber quality. Now the only commercial use that I know of for it right now is musical instrument reeds, clarinets and sax. That's what they make it out of. Only this plant. It's not bamboo. It's a Rhododendron, and that's where the musical instrument reed gets the name reed. It's from giant reed, and but it doesn't take many acres to saturate the world market in musical instrument reeds. But nevertheless, it does show that it's got a unique fiber property to it. Now there are people up in Washington, at Washington's University of Washington, looking very, very seriously at it for pulp and paper. So again, the environmentalists have got this conflict of interest. They want, for whatever reason, they want non-wood paper, but they don't want invasive species around either. So here's a great candidate for non-wood paper, but it's an invasive species. They don't want us to use any plant that came from outside of the United States. So there's all of these conflicting interests, but what was interesting is, just quickly and then we'll move on, I started work with this. These plots are about 10 years old. I started as a result of a company up in Seattle actually asking me to work with them on this, and I went over to Los Angeles and I saw there that the plant doesn't actually produce these. These are inflorescences or seed heads, flowers, but they don't get any seed in them. Anyway, once a plant produces that, it quits growing. Okay, it's over. And I went over to Los Angeles, and it's even taller there and much thicker. And there was very few of those flowering plumes there. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because typically reproductive growth in a plant is influenced by day length, and day length of course is influenced by latitude, and LA is about the same as we are, so the day length is the same. And I thought, well, that's strange. It doesn't flower there, which means it just carries on growing. You see, it doesn't stop growth because of flowering, whereas here the ones that I saw, the plants that I knew around here, they did flower. So I thought, well, this is interesting. It looks like it may well be a genetic difference between these plants out there and the plants here. So the only way to find out was go and get some of that stuff, bring it here, see what happens. Well, this stuff came from there. and it turns out that it's environment, it's not genetics, which was a disappointment to me. In fact, we plant this stuff in the ground, and that very first season, come August, boom, up it puts a flower. And so it's curious, very curious to me that same day length, and yet it flowers here and it doesn't flower there. And all I can come up with now is that there's a difference in our diurnal temperature, that it gets much cooler. Even in the desert area of Los Angeles, it gets much cooler at night there, because the lower humidity versus the night temperatures here are much higher. Down there, I was always, when I go out there in the summertime, I'm amazed. It drops down into the 60s at night. Here, it sits up around 70. Quite a big difference. It gets hot as heck there in the daytime, but it's a dry heat. It's totally different, I guess, ambient conditions, and that's the only thing that I can put it down to now, that it's not only day length, it's got something to do with those different diurnal conditions.
Is it winter hardy at all?
Well, it obviously doesn't grow in the winter, but yeah, you can take it further north than this. I've seen it in Oklahoma, and I've seen it northern part of this state. So there's a big area that we could grow it in. All the Gulf states could grow it very easily. Yeah. Now, just quickly, you know, some people have said, oh, you could cut this plant twice a year. That's what it looks like if you cut it twice a year. Same plant, okay? We cut that twice a year. That's the second cycle of growth, 6-month cycle. Ultimately, we're going to kill it if we keep cutting it. You can cut it only once a year. This is cut once a year.
Power's got 14 hydro plants. We've got plants on the Warrior River and the Coosa River. Thurlow was put in service about 1930. We've got 3 units here. We've got 2 larger units. The larger unit's about 34, 35 megawatts. We've got a small unit here that runs about 9 megawatts, and we run a minimum flow with it. Here, part of our license agreement is we have to pass a minimum flow 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And actually right now we've got it ramped down trying to fill Lake Martin up. A lot of people don't realize, but we are still in a drought. We're still in a deficit of rainfall. So they've actually got it ramped down about a fourth of what it normally is, trying to get Lake Martin full. Thurlow, like I said, it was put in service in about 30th in the 1930s or 1930. About the whole plant was upgraded in the mid-90s. New turbine, new controls, new generator, new everything just about it. It was about time. The old girl had done a lot of work. That's 70, 80 years before they done the upgrade. Each of the big generators here will pass about 5,500 CFS, which is what we relate all of our flows to cubic feet per second. We don't really relate to gallons per minute. Everything's cubic feet per second. They pass about 5,500 per unit. The total plant will pass about 12,000, 13,000 CFS. That's under normal conditions. Of course, when we got a flood, you know, then we spill water, and it just depends on what the good Lord sends us, how much we spill.
Spill it onto UV's Research Center.
You know, we don't, that's one of the things that happens.
5 gates.
We don't like to spill water. We like for it to go through the turbine. You know, when we spill water, that's a no-no. And we haven't spilled water here since, it's going on 3.5 years. So that sort of gives you an idea about what kind of drought we have been in. For us, that's unusual. Usually we'll knock down these flash gates 3 times a year. And for us to go 3.5 years without spilling any water is pretty unusual. That hadn't happened in a long time, or not that I'm aware of. The way that's got the wooden flashboards, in fact, we're the only plant in the Alabama hydro that's got this type of spillway. And those flashboards are gravity. When they get so much water pressure against them, those things will fall over. They got a big counterweight made of cast on the bottom of them. When they get so much pressure, they'll fall over, allow the flow to go through them. Then they're designed where they're supposed to stand up as the water gets off of them. Most time we have to go out and help a couple of them stand up. But you know, for the most part, they do. So Thurlow's unique in that aspect. At Yates, we have a complete open spillway where the water just runs over the spillway. Most of our plants in Alabama has spillway gates with frames. They actually have to go out and pick the gates up to release flood. Any questions? You're gonna ask me.
With this period that you talked, last year I was under the impression.
Last point where lake levels and flows is just about more important to us than generating electricity.
Okay.
It's just about that.
So with this little story too, it's kind of understandable when people
Put out about 6-8% of the Alabama power total. That's a good year. You know, so that's, I mean, nobody can make it as cheap as we can. Don't get me wrong. Nobody can touch us price-wise. We can make it cheaper than anybody. They can't get close to us. But it's still today what it would take to build a plant with all of the license and environmental issues and the pure capital.
Can you touch on a few of the environmental?
Well, the flows, the lake levels. You have to buy property. You have to you just wouldn't believe. I mean, we plant deer plots for deer to feed on up above Harris. And anytime you build a dam, you got to buy that much property somewhere else that the water displaces. Most of the time we wind up donating that to the state for parks and such as that. So there's so many environmental regulations that goes in to where today I'm not sure that it would be economically feasible.
So what you're saying is that with the existing plants, your production is cheap, but if you were to build new plants, it's hard to make it back.
It'd be tough. I'm not saying it'd be impossible.
Yeah.
And that as other fuel prices go up, that can change. And as they start getting tax incentives for the green, all that can change.
Or a renewable portfolio standard forcing you to do it.
Forcing it to the 20%, which is some states are doing. That may change. These are our two larger units right here with our smaller unit behind you. You'll see some other auxiliary equipment. It takes lots of auxiliary equipment to control these units and run them. This is our control room. You see a lot of gauges and relays. These are multi-million-dollar machines, so we have a lot of relaying to protect them electronically, and we have a lot of mechanically relaying. We got 110 kV lines leaving Thurlow. A lot of the relaying you see is for those transmission lines for protection of them. A couple of things unique to, I don't know if they're unique to Alabama Power, but we control our plants from Birmingham. They actually have an operator up there underneath our corporate headquarters. They control all 14 of our hydro plants from the plant computers right there. So they come through the computers behind them. Typically, they control them 7/24. The only reason, of course, if we lose a computer, then we man the plant. Or if you're in real bad weather, we'll man the plant to sort of help them out. They have their hands full. We've got real bad weather, some serious flooding going on. We help them out at that time. Another thing unique, you see those generators sitting out there spinning, but we're not generating. They're actually a synchronous motor right now. We motor our units 7/24. And we do that for a couple of different reasons. One is that helps us control the voltage on the system. They can actually help bump the voltage up, actually suck some bars in, and try to keep the voltage down on the system. Another reason is that gives us spinning reserve. NERC requires us to have, and I don't know what the number is, but they require us to have so much spinning reserve. Well, that spinning reserve, that operator at Birmingham, he can go down there clicking on buttons and start loading units, bam, 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 bam. So if they lose a big 800 megawatt coal burning unit, in just a matter of a minute, he can go in there loading hydro. We're not but a little bit, but all of Alabama Hydro put together is about 1,400 megawatts. So that's a big plus, and it gives us a lot of flexibility on our system and help maintain our system. Another thing that we do in hydro is we have black start capability. Remember what happened up in the Northeast a few years back when they actually, their grid collapsed, they started putting everything to black. Well, we have the capability of rolling a unit here and helping start building that system back. We do that in almost all of our hydros. It's not our first line, but we have that capability in almost all of our hydro plants. So that's another thing that we can do to help the system out. Any questions? We're going to just make a round down through the plant and show you a few things. You can look up and see the rotor. You'll see just some other equipment down there. It's not quite as loud down there. Then we'll walk back out on the transformer deck. One thing I didn't mention a while ago was Thurlow has about 85 foot of head. That's where you get your horsepower from, is your head, and that's where you get the most megawatts. Just to give you an idea, Martin's got about 140 foot of head, and they've got about 45, 50 megawatt generators up there. And it doesn't take the water flow because they've got more head than what we do here. And we're strictly a run of the river. We can only generate basically when Martin is passing us water. Here at Yates, we're just a run of the river dam. We're market is a storage reservoir. They can store water, release it whenever we need it. All right, let's go back out. Look, what you got here, if you look up, that's the rotor above your head spinning. The shaft down underneath this head cover will be the turbine actually down underneath this head cover. Megawatt units, and they're gonna have 16 of them. Unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah.